Michelle Graves, your host on The Power of Money, and I'm honored to have you as a part of my world in this coming segment. With The Power of Money, as you know, we are interested in three things. First, that you get the necessary education so that you and your family will have the information to do well in these difficult times. The second thing I'm interested in is for you to be empowered to prosper. I want only the best for you, but you can't get that if you don't have the education and then the drive to make it happen. And the final thing, and perhaps the most important thing, is that you be energized. Because life is more than a journey. Life is about living. And so I want you to learn these things and to be empowered and encouraged and energized. I'm Michelle Graves. Now here we go. And here we go. I'm your host, Michelle Graves. And as always, it's a delight to be able to be in your presence to share with you information that you need to know to allow you and your family to survive in the days ahead. Because truly, we are looking at so much happening at the same time. And the world may not be flat in terms of how it is structured. But the way information travels in milliseconds, it is flat. You can find out what's happening in China less than a minute after it occurs. You can find out what's happening in most parts of the world instantaneously, thanks to the technology that is available in these days we live in. Good and bad. As I tell people, good and bad. The good is that it's boom. Everybody gets information in milliseconds. The bad is everybody gets information in milliseconds. Yeah, you can't hide. You can't cheat. So everybody's up front. If I'm a thief, I'm a thief. If I'm a criminal, I'm a criminal. If I'm smart, I'm smart. You know, why? Because you can get all of this in milliseconds about people. You want to know what makes their world? Google them. Google their name. Go to, the Wikipedia. You can get all kinds of information about world. And you would think with all of the availability of this type of information that people would be better informed. But the reality is that they're not. Because now we have categories called fake news, which I don't know this is real. Who said so? Then you have opinion, which is, I said it, therefore it is. And that's where people are today. And then you have what we call scientific evidence, which is evidence that is based upon a specific protocol of research and conclusion. And that's where I am. I'm not interested in what your opinion is. I'm not interested in the notion of fake news. I'm not interested in anything like that. I'm interested in let's lay it out, let's look at it, and then let's look at how we can benefit from that information knowledge. Now, today's show is going to be focusing on inflation and who profits. Okay, so to be able to talk about that subject in a common sense way, because like I tell folks, information, if nobody understands it, is just worthless. And we're inundated with information and we can't apply it because we don't know how it works, we don't know why it works, we don't know if it works. And so people just say, well, I'm just going to go with my opinion. Okay, and that's not the best way to look at anything. You have to be willing to consider other factors. But today, I'm going to tag on what I talked about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, maybe longer. If you will go to your YouTube channel and you will go to The Power of Money with Michelle Graves, and you will look up the category stagflation. That's stagnation and inflation. I started talking about inflation actually well over 2 years ago. But more recently, fast forwarding, I did a show on it to prepare people for what I felt was the inevitable. And for the record, I took a contrarian position to the Federal Reserve Bank, who said, Mr. Powell, inflation, we got this. And I said, no, you don't. You don't have this at all. And the combination of stagnation of growth and inflation was going to throw this country into an economic mess. So, I hold to that. I'm going to urge you as viewers and as followers to go back to that show, because there was a lot of key information that could have helped you if you had moved on my recommendations then. One of them being that one of the characteristics of inflation is higher prices. Oh my gosh, higher prices. Ask the Germans after World War II, well, actually before World War II, that's how they went into World War II. They came out of World War I owing everyone. Hear me about the German people. They went into World War I. They came out a bankrupt country, owing everybody. Inflation, the cost of everything went through the roof, and they had all this debt from the war. Well, that scenario drugged them into World War II. Right. Because they figured, I don't have nothing to lose. These people have broke me down. And it was based upon their identification, falsely, I might add, of people that they felt there was a target. They identified who was responsible for this mess, and it was the Jews, the German Jews, which was a flat-out lie. But for politicians, as you should know by now, convenience is everything. We got a victim. We got a targeted group that's causing this. And off they went into World War II, devastation of their people, the destruction of 6 million honorable Jews, and a world history that shows Germany as a pariah nation. This is documented historically. I don't care whether you believe it or not. False news. No, it's not. All those poor people dead. And the world's still dealing with the reality of that time in history and the reign of a madman. So inflation is not new. Its outcomes are fairly predictable. And we have but to look into the Americas. Venezuela was an extremely prosperous country, stable. It got tied into inflation, oil prices, everything went haywire, and look at them today. Okay? This is not fake news. This is history. Documented survivors, people that know what can happen. And anytime I hear that term as a financial advisor, I always get nervous because I know what inflation can do and will do to the psyche of a nation. Let me first define what is inflation so you will know, because the United States right now, as I predicted, is in the midst of inflation. And sorry, Federal Reserve, too late. Too late, Mr. Powell. Too late. You can raise interest rates all you want to try to slow down activity in the economy. But it's too late because we're in different times and things have changed. And again, I'm not going to get into the politics of politicians because I don't do that. I like my life. As Mary J. Blige says, I'm fine. So let's get into this. What is inflation? Definitionally, inflation is a measure of the rate of prices, of rising prices of goods and services in an economy. Okay, it's a measure of the rate of rising prices of goods and services in an economy. If inflation is occurring, leading to higher prices for basic necessities such as food, it can have a negative impact on society. So we stop right there. What are you talking about, Ms. Graves? Well, over the past year, inflation has been itching upward, which is the price of goods and services has been increasing. Now, because it's incremental, meaning it's not a huge increase up front, but it's every month a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then boom, you look at it, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't afford this anymore. I can't afford these prices. Well, if you talk to many of the big boys who produce this stuff, they will tell you, yes, you can, because you're spending money to buy it. You may not be able to buy as much, but you haven't stopped buying it at all, which tells us that we can continue on this path. And that's what they're doing. But you need to know that it's not based on just one thing. It is a compilation of a number of things. And you need to be aware that inflation can occur. It manifests in the form of rising prices. Okay, this past month we took a real big hit, and with price increases. You all already know, if you shop, you know that don't buy meat. I'm talking about anything that has a form of a cow. Stay away. Strip steak is running at, I think it was $25.99 a pound. And my recommendation was, well, you need to buy yourself some cows. You need to find a farmer who's willing to raise your cows, paying. It's cheaper than you buying them in the store. Why is meat so expensive? And that is the second thing about inflation. It can occur when the price increases are a result of increases in production costs, such as raw materials and wages. Now, with a cow, sounds simple, got cows out in the field eating, that's a lot of money right there, feeding them. But then at some point, you fatten them up and they have to go to the slaughterhouse. You have to transport them to the slaughterhouse. Well, if gasoline is higher, and it definitely is, it's going to cost you more money to take the cow to the slaughterhouse where they are killed. Yeah. And then the slaughterhouse has to pay people to kill them, to prepare them, and to proceed on to have them shipped out. These people have to be paid competitively. And we know that, like everything else, thanks to COVID, a lot of workers aren't there. It's just they're sick. They don't want to come to work. Really, it's a revolution taking place in the workplace. People don't want to work. Retirees are retiring. I mean, to the tune of unprecedented numbers, are like, you know what? I don't care if I don't get any money or much money or make much money at retirement. I got to get up out of here. And they're just cashing out and they're moving on. And then you have regular working people who got sick from COVID, really sick, and came out the workplace for quarantine, and many of them didn't come back. They said, you know what? I'm not getting paid much. I'll just start my own little business, and I'll get to be with my wife and kids, and this is what I want to do with my life. This all has to do with production costs, because now it's more expensive, okay? It's more expensive to kill the cow and to have the cow properly dressed and packaged, meat packing, and go to market. Why? Because the meat has to be transported by a truck to market. Well, in case you've looked around, truckers are in high demand. Why? Because a lot of them don't want to do that kind of work anymore. That's hard work. And because manufacturers are trying to keep costs down, they aren't paying truckers what truckers feel they're worth. I had an interesting listen-in on a trucker talking to his friend about the cost of trucking meat across the United States. I was shocked. In fact, I had to pretend like I wasn't listening because I was like, oh my gosh, I need to find a farmer if I'm going to eat meat, because this is not going to get worked out. He said, man, I got to take care of my rig. I got to have gas. I got to pay toll taxes. And then they're only offering me 1 penny more for me transporting from California here to local. So I don't want to do that. So what does that mean? That means that because production costs, manufacturers are trying to keep costs down, and they're not paying truckers what truckers feel they should be paid, and they got all these other taxes, then you have inflation feeding price increases. Prices are going up because, again, raw materials, wages are not increasing. I mean, you can say whatever you want, and you can say, well, $20 is a good wage. And I will say to you, that's your opinion. Remember, I talked about the 3 things at the beginning: fake news, your opinion, and then science or the data. Okay, your opinion says they're making good wage. Okay, the data says they're not. They're not. They don't want to drive trucks. They're not making enough to cover their expenses because their expenses are going up because of inflation. I don't know if you've looked at gas lately, because I do predict gas is going to head past $4. It's going to head past $5. And that's for regular gas. That's not diesel. That's regular gas. So they're having a tough time. And then the other thing is because people were not able to get out and shop during COVID, we now have an issue where consumers are willing to pay more for the product, which, again, like I shared with you, the manufacturers are not coming down on their prices because the consumer has shown a willingness to pay that price. Now, here is an economic term, which is rational behavior. And inflation kills rational behavior because the consumer is willing to pay 20 cents more for paper towels if he or she can buy the whole bin and put them away, because inflation causes hoarding. Yeah, inflation as well as scarcity causes hoarding, because with inflation, you never know what the price is going to go up to the next day. There are cases in Germany pre-World War II when inflation was through the roof, and a loaf of bread, which was 25 cents in the morning, was $2 in the afternoon. If you think I'm kidding about this, you may want to go to the grocery store and find out what your favorite bread is selling for now. Because my favorite bread that I love is now up to $5 a loaf from $3.99. Okay, now I'm going to be honest with you. I almost choked. Then I looked at the shelves and all the other bread was gone, which was much less expensive. People were like, I'm going to buy as much as I can and freeze this stuff, because I do have a freezer. If you don't have one, get one before you can't get one. So I bought my little bread and I growled as I paid for my bread and stuck it in the freezer. Again, inflation forces hoarding, which puts a pressure on production, because now everybody's hoarding to try to be prepared for a rainy day. Now, some companies, and you know they aren't all good guys, okay, snick, will benefit from inflation by charging more for their products as a result of the high demand for their goods. We're seeing this right now with cars. If you have a used car, you're going to get double what you would have gotten before because of shortage of used cars, because everybody's buying used cars because new cars don't have the chips, and that's another problem, and blah, blah, blah. So dealers are taking advantage of the opportunity, although it's absolutely obnoxious, unfair, and all the words, terms you want to use to describe this kind of behavior. But the reality is this is what is going on. Now, inflation can occur in any product or service, including needs-based expenses such as housing, food, medical care, and utilities, as well as lightweight expenses such as cosmetics. Oh yeah, it's going to cost you to look pretty. Automobiles, which I've already talked about, and jewelry. I was looking in a magazine the other day, just looking, not buying, and I was absolutely shocked at what a necklace sells for today versus a year ago. I was like, well, I don't need jewelry. It's a desirable, but it's not a mandatory. I can't eat it. But the fact is that if you want to look pretty, it's going to cost you money. Same thing for shoes. Same thing for clothing. Not good clothing, because clothing today, the quality is just really, really compromised. I mean, it is. In many cases, you'll do better to go to secondhand stores and consignment and even thrift stores that are selling merchandise and buy things, have them dry cleaned because you don't know who's put their hands on it, and wear it, because at least it's cotton or wool or silk, or the things that were normal in manufacturing of clothing to be sold through retail distributors, no longer the case. Let me just give you an example. Most sheets are not cotton anymore. Look at the back of the tag. They are cotton and polyester. Now, I bring this to the table because sheets in the past used to be 100% cotton. And really elegant sheets used to be Egyptian cotton. Well, you can get Egyptian cotton sheets, but it's going to cost you a whole lot of money. So what do manufacturers do? They blend the two and charge you what you were paying for the real deal. And you're so excited because they say it's 1,000 thread count. The thread count means nothing if polyester is used because it will fray and ravel. But again, the American consumer doesn't understand the mindset of manufacturers, which is to collapse production costs, to collapse the high quality ingredients that made up clothing and sheets and towels, and now it's just blends. And anytime you see a blend, you already know what you're getting, which is after a couple of washes, it's going to start to feel itchy. And if you have a condition like mine, I have eczema, and I can't do polyester. I can't do polyester anything. It's not that I'm like that, it's that my skin will break out because polyester is would you believe it, an oil-based product. Yeah, the gunk that's left after they siphon up the oil is the gooey product that is refined and is used to make nylon and other things. So, again, polyester is not an environmentally acceptable product. you need to know its source. And if you don't believe me, Google it. It's all right there. Information is there today freely for you to get it. Now, I talked about once inflation becomes prevalent, now here's the dark side. Once it becomes prevalent in an economy, the expectation of it continuing and worsening becomes the overriding concern of consumers and businesses alike. Everybody is worried about prices getting worse. And you know what? They don't disappoint because they are getting worse. Now, are there some things that you can benefit from during inflation? Actually, as a consumer, if you're in a lot of debt, the value of the dollar is less, so you're paying for credit card debt or even car or other expenses with money that is worth less. Now, I'm going to say this to all of you that are listening because we have printed a whole bunch of money. Let's not get it twisted. People got stimulus checks. All kinds of people got unemployment compensation because they lost all their jobs due to COVID. Okay, companies folded, people collected, and all this money in an economy. This is why the Fed is looking at this so carefully, because there's a lot of money in the economy right now. And are people spending the money? Well, actually, only those who have to. The most needy are spending the money for food, clothing, and shelter, food for their children, clothing for primarily their children, and rent, which has gone through the roof. Okay? Despite the rent moratorium, I tell people rent was not rent cancellation. It was a stay on you paying the rent until the economy recovered. Well, guess what? Moratorium's over. The economy, in my opinion, is extremely fragile and weak. People are still out here without good paying jobs. You can talk about a wage increase, but if your housing costs have doubled because of greed and inflation, if your clothing costs have doubled, if your food costs have doubled, then is it a wage increase or is it a wage decrease? Because you may have gotten more money, but it spends less. That is called inflation. And as I've shared over the years, it's not what you make, it's what you spend and how much it costs. And when workers begin to understand that, they will have an appreciation for the insidious, vicious nature of an entire economy that is screeching, in my opinion, to a slow and painful halt. Okay? And I'm not predictive. I'm just telling you, based upon the data, because I don't look at fake news and I don't care what your opinion is, but the data suggests that things are not well. And I'm going to tell you all something, and hear me well, because this program is going to air while we're in the middle of a pending war over Ukraine. And before you say, where's that? Pull it up on your Google and see where this strategic country, the second largest country in Europe, is located and why the Russians want that country back. Because in the good old days, it was a part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. It was part of an amalgamation of countries or nation states that were under the leadership at that time of Stalin and Lenin. These were their great leaders, and they consolidated everybody under a one language, one rule communist. And of course, with the breakup of the USSR, all these little nation states went on about their way. But my point in saying this is that if we go into war and start retaliatory measures against Russia, I dare say what inflation is going to look like. I think my $4.99 loaf of bread will probably go up to $10, at which point I won't be eating bread. In economic terms, that's called substitution. You just substitute one thing for another, and that's what American consumers are doing. They haven't started hoarding yet, although I will tell you that you need to take advantage of the circumstances right now before things worsen. And yes, I am not an optimist. I am a realist. Look, and is the stock market going to be affected? Well, you're never going to get me to say on camera, what I think about the stock market. But I will say to you, use the mother wit your mother gave you and come to your own conclusions about it. If I speak on it, they'll come to get me, okay, for giving unsolicited market advice. And I don't do that, and I won't do it. I've been in this industry for 40 years. I know exactly how the boys work. You're not going to get me on that, but I'm going to tell you this. You better be keeping your eye on the stock market, and you better be looking at your 401k and your pension funds and all those things that are going to be impacted and are now being impacted by inflation, okay? And let me put in a plug for myself since I'm talking about this. I have represented companies for over 20 years that offer guarantees where you will not be suckered by inflation or anything else, where your money's guaranteed and where you can participate on up and down swings in the market, not down swings, up swings. And I'll be happy to talk to you about it and see if we can't position you so that you can sleep at night. It's bad enough with everything else that's going on, but to really deal with what it's going to do to your financial assets is really, really, really scary. And you can be a butterfly and say, I'm going to be fine. There's a fly swatter in the mist. I'm not laughing because it's not funny. With the Fed, the Federal Reserve is very powerful. In my opinion, they run this country, not Congress, the Fed, because they determine how the economy goes. Politicians can legislate, but the Fed controls monetary policy and interest rates. And the Fed has a target interest rate of 2%, and it adjusts, again, monetary policy to combat inflation. Well, we are well over 2%. And I definitely know they're going to be raising interest rates. I don't know how quickly, I don't know how fast, but they're going to do what's within their authority to put a halt to all this price rising and to bring our nation back to stability. Well, I must say that I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work. I think that this virus began to accelerate the unbuckling that was already taking place anyway. And I think the money printing frenzy, I understand why. I do. Give people some money so that they will go out and spend the money and help the economy. That's how the economy chugs along. It's a consumer-based economy. We run the country, the consumer spending. Consumers spend, business produce. Consumers spend, business produce more. Consumers spend. But what happens when consumers get spooked and stop spending the money that they got, which many middle income people did. The poor spent, but the middle income didn't, And the rich aren't going to spend anyway because their money makes money. They don't need a stimulus. Are you kidding me? They need to pay more taxes, which is what Dwight Eisenhower made them do during those 50s, the 1950s, when the country was doing just great. But the rich did not just get richer, no, because there was an understanding that you're rich because other people made you rich. Now we're in a situation where that's not the case, and so here we are. But the Fed has a 2% inflation mandate, and that has been just crucified. So we can expect interest rates to go up, which is supposed to tighten, meaning businesses, it's going to cost them more to borrow money to feed the growth. And they want to put a cap on that, so that won't happen. I hope I'm not getting too complex here, because that is not my goal. This is a tough issue. It's important that you know what drives inflation. It's important to know how you are a part of inflation. But inflation is like blood. It is all a part of our anatomy. It increases the production costs, which I told you earlier, such as raw materials and wages. We've got a housing shortage in America. People want to buy houses, but houses can't be built because of the cost of building a house with raw materials, and inflation has pushed that cost to what we feel are unreasonable sums of money for people to buy a home, particularly young people trying to get started out. Okay? You got 18 bids on one house. My daughter just bought a beautiful home. Beautiful, beautiful. But she had an inkling, and she put in her bid first, and God was with her because there were a ton of other bids, but they accepted her bid first. And I told her, that is a blessing because people are bidding. Young people need places to raise their children. And the cost is through the roof. For rental, it's through the roof. Again, we're looking at higher prices for everything, including finished goods. Then you're dealing with shortages and scarcity, which is pushing the price of cars because they can't get the computer chips, which come from China, and that's causing a problem. The U.S. wants to ramp up, but that's a 3 to 5 year window. So people want to buy cars. Their old cars eventually do break down. So how do they do it? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy. 2 years ago, I bought another car. I screamed, hollered, everything. But the Toyota salesman told me, confidentially, Miss Graves, you may scream and holler, but 2 years from now, you're going to be jumping up and down thanking God that you bought this car. And I said under my breath, that's your opinion. But I bought the car because I believed in the man. And let me tell you something. I am so glad. I'm so glad I bought that car because you can't get that car now. Period. You can't get it. They called me, asked, we'll buy it back. I said, will you buy it back? What will I drive? Okay? Because that's what we're faced with. A whole bunch of people that are pushing car demand, which is driving up prices on acquisition of a car, which is accelerating inflation on cars. Now, let's look at the biggest expense for businesses. And the biggest expense for businesses, aside from their production costs, because it does cost to do a car, parts, labor. Labor is wages. And a business can give the increase in wages. I mean, you see the ads, Amazon's paying more. All these companies are paying more because it's costing them more. It is. But wages will push inflation because the cost of finding a qualified candidate, which causes production costs to rise, is inflationary. We know that with Amazon, their Prime Plus plan where they'll deliver stuff, that's gone up. Why has it gone up? Because wages have gone up, because gasoline has gone up, and production costs to get that stuff on a truck and deliver it to you in one day, it's going to cost you. Now, again, will there be further increases? I don't know. It depends upon what their profit margins are from the increase in cost. If people refuse to pay the higher cost and just say, I'm going to go elsewhere, then they may reconsider. But I think people are going to pay the higher cost because they want the convenience, like Uber and like DoorDash and everybody else. Everybody wants convenience, and if they can pay for it, they will. Okay? Now, I'm going to say something because out of inflation, there is another activity that really becomes significant, and this is the underground economy. Hear me well. Everybody's not going to starve. There are people all over the world who are accustomed to a cash-based economy. They will cook your food. They will sell you produce. They will fix your car, okay, cash, and they will feed their families. They have barterable skills. Barter means I'll give you this, you give me that. Right now, they're still accepting currency, money, to pay for their services. But if money continues to go down the tank, they may want something else instead of money or equivalent value. They may want your steaks that you have in your freezer in exchange for putting in a transmission. Okay? That is bartering. When that happens, you can say that an economy is starting to tank. And I'm going to tell you that as far as a consumer is concerned, they don't care. They just want to get her done. So you've got a serious underground economy that is going on right now. Maybe some of you are part of it. Maybe some of you have used their services for car repairs, etc. Okay? But I predict that it will accelerate as people begin to look at their own skill sets and what they can sell to make money. I predict that you're going to see more people cooking food and selling it to their neighbors and friends who don't want to cook and who don't want to eat out, and it's cash. It's cash. Pay me cash. A lot of restaurants and mom and pops are doing that anyway. They don't want what you got, okay? Or they're willing to sell you for a certain exchange. That is all a part of an economy in decline. The world was on a barter system, period. Economics 101, before currency even became favorable. Salt was tradable. Can you believe that? Salt. Salt was very precious and very expensive, okay? And salt was barterable, and people used it. Today it's commonplace. It doesn't have value. But who's to say? I don't know what will be barterable as we go down the road, but it will be things that are not that are not available readily, and people will take up on that. Natural disasters, including what we're dealing with now, can drive prices higher. Case in point, if a hurricane destroys a crop of corn, or if famine, we're dealing with drought in California. California is the breadbasket of America. At the point they have no rain and fire everywhere, that is going to drive up the prices of that produce all over the country, since, again, these products are used in other goods and services. Case in point is corn in Iowa and Idaho, all those hurricanes. Corn is more than staple food for cows and horses. Corn is used in a lot of other things. Corn makes sweetener. High fructose oil is a case in point. Look at your soda cans. You will see high fructose is in everything. It has replaced sugar, cane sugar, as being cheaper. It was, and more affordable for use in soda, for use as a sweetener, for all kinds of things. There are impacts with natural disasters, so we cannot be light about this, particularly since our country, the United States of America, is having all kinds of natural disasters. I mean, between too much sun because of the climate, between hurricanes, tornadoes. I mean, come on. Natural disasters are becoming so commonplace, but the impact is to drive up inflation. Okay? I hope you economic scholars are listening to me closely, because we are at a fork in the road with this. We've got COVID, okay? It's not gone. We like to put out the spin. Oh, we got this under control. Then why are people still dying? Okay? Why are people not clear how it is being handled over here? How many more booster shots are we going to have to take? Okay, what are the side effects, the long haulers, the people that got this disease that can no longer work? They are sick, okay? Our healthcare systems are in collapse because of COVID. Healthcare is a major component of our economy. Doctors, hospitals, labs, treatment alternatives. This is the healthcare system. In a country where we are looking at people leaving the system and going on Medicare because of their age and retiring, the inability to get good health care, not that we were ever the best, because we were not, but how is that going to work? And how is that going to fuel inflation, and what are the consequences? Doctors are going to have to be paid more. That's going to pass to somebody, and guess who it's going to get passed to? You and I. Okay? You and I. Inflation affects everything. Don't be light about it. What are some of the other things? Inflation affects gas prices. Why? Because gas is a function of supply and demand. And because we have such a demand for a conscripted supply, I mean, not to be funny, but Russia's the second largest supplier of oil in the world. And how you think that's going to work out? And then before you say, your opinion talking, well, we can turn on our oil supply. Yeah, we can, and yes, we have. And when it runs out, what do you do then? So gas prices are affected, and gas affects everything. Despite what you saw on the Super Bowl advertisements, we are not a nation of electric cars yet. Okay? Yet. I do feel that it's heading that way, but for right now, we are a gas-driven economy, which means our trucks drive gas, diesel. We drive gas. Can you afford $6 a gallon like the Europeans to go from point A to point B? Are you conscripted to working at home? And are businesses able? Some businesses can do remote, but a lot of them, it's about production. So their workers have to get there. And paying gas and cars and everything is going to drive everything up. My point in all of this is that we're here. Boom. We're here. Now, what are you going to do about it? I've laid the beginnings. I've told you the housing market is going to be in a pit because people can't afford to live in a home. Corporations are buying houses, jacking up rents. people, the homeless numbers, absence of food, all of these things are characteristics of a nation that's having a tough time. And we are. So, who benefits from inflation? I already told you. Certain industries are going to benefit from inflation. Profit margins for companies are going to increase. Their stakeholders or shareholders will do better. They will benefit. Energy prices will benefit from inflation and the surge of demand for goods and services. As I close out today's program, and I talk to you very openly and hopefully in an understandable way, just know you can call me. You can call me if you want to make some changes in your portfolio. Again, as I tell people all the time, I am not your stockbroker. I am not going to help you to accumulate. I'm going to take the safe road of keeping you where you are, meaning you don't lose any money, lose any more money. I'm going to lock that in for the days ahead. You can reach me at 800-734-3915. Don't hesitate to go to YouTube and watch The Power of Money with Michelle Graves, Stagflation, as well as this show, Inflation, and what you can do about it. Thank you for being a part of my world. I have enjoyed this show, and again, appreciate your listening and digesting a complicated subject. But know me and know for a fact that we're here. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Order your steps. Take a disciplined approach to how you are going to survive in the days ahead. And as always, love, peace, joy. God bless you. Make it a great day, because today is the day that you are here. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Michelle Graves. Bye-bye.